Greetings, I'm Salvador Cordova. Welcome to Evidence and Reasons, a YouTube channel dedicated to exploring evidence and reasons for the Christian faith. Part of exploring evidence and reasons for the Christian faith is to look to give a platform to opposing views, and as they're explored and compared with the answers a Christian like myself might offer, the viewers are then hopefully a little closer to making a decision what they believe is true. So I'm privileged to be joined by Danny. And Danny, why don't you introduce yourself and just tell the viewers why you wanted to talk today. Thank you.
Yeah, my name is Danny. I'm kind of philosophically trained. I have a degree in philosophy, working on another one, and I enjoy debates. I really enjoy discussions. I would describe myself as an agnostic atheist or some variant of some kind of atheist, but I have great sympathies for Christians and just generally theists. Right, a lot of the intuitions that they have, I also have, and I think they're definitely coming somewhere, even to a point where it really it kind of haunts my my philosophical views concerning the existence of God, right? But I have a lot. But the reason why I came on to talk with Sal, right, was when I used to be a Christian, right, and I used to provide arguments for God's existence by appealing to the kind of spectacular things that happen in the cell, more specifically in DNA and RNA and transcription, translation, replication, and all this stuff. To me, that's always amazed me, and even to the point where even a few days ago, I shivered at the complexity and the kind of the analogs that could be drawn between these biological states and certain like other complex technologies, like with respect to programming and stuff. So it's still, no, I'm right there with the theist in terms of there's something weird going on here, right? But I wanted to ask Sal a very specific question, something that I used to believe, right, that I no longer do, was this notion of the impossibility of life arising from non-life, right? And I'm trained philosophically, like I said, right? And so there are very strict notions of impossibility and possibility in philosophy. So when someone says that it is impossible that X, the most broadest sense of impossibility refers to X, or whether that be a concept or some kind of proposition, does not cohere with some set of logical axioms, right? Now, I don't know if that's what that's what you're appealing to. In many cases, the other most common form of possibility has to do with physical possibility, right? If something is physically impossible, it doesn't cohere with a set of laws, natural laws, right? And so when we say something, now, Sal, I've heard you say this before. You've said that it is impossible for for a car or some Boeing 747. I don't know forgive me, I don't know what the numbers are, to be to result as from some kind of disaster like a tornado going through a city or a junkyard, right? And I said the same thing, right? I said that this kind of thing was impossible, right? Now, the question I have for you is, what do you mean by this? If you do not mean that it's highly, highly improbable.
I mean, it's practically impossible. So we can always admit any sort of possibilities, but then how would we live our life if we're going to say something is formally possible and then try to live our lives on something that's practically impossible?
Okay. So,
and that pertains to how really the question is, one, we're finite human beings. Trying to use philosophy to determine ultimate reality, I think, is futile, and we can only act practically. So I specifically,
that's a profound philosophical statement.
Yeah, I don't get it. Why? I mean, I find it in mathematics. They're axioms we know, we accept that we're not going to prove. We don't bother trying to prove them. we're willing to state it and accept it by faith. There's no point in trying to be more rigorous because it's not going to prove anything.
Do you feel like philosophy is the same way?
Yes.
So,
but the mathematicians have admitted it, and there's kind of something funny that the physicist John Barrow said. Maybe so I don't butcher his quote. If you give me a moment to Google it.
yeah, well, I don't want to say anything if you're focused on Googling, but okay, but I do want to. You understood? Did you understood my example of a married bachelor, right?
Yes.
Do you think?
Let me, maybe see if I could find. I think I may have found the quote, and this is relevant to our discussion. That's why I didn't want to.
Well, let me know if I should say something, or should I let you find it?
No. I found it. If a religion is defined to be a system of ideas that contain unprovable statements, then Gödel taught us that mathematics is not only a religion, it is the only religion that can prove itself to be one. And he was also saying, yeah, if religion is defined to be a system of ideas that contain unprovable statements, then Gödel taught us that mathematics is not only a religion.
You're saying Gödel, right?
I've heard it pronounced.
Is it Kurt Gödel? Is it?
Yes, he was a logician. Okay.
Yeah.
So let me put that in the chat.
Yeah. So
I mean, if mathematics cannot, if something, I mean, if you just think about it, you think about the edifice upon which physical science is built. At the foundation is math. At the foundation of mathematics are unprovable statements, yet practically speaking, it's very powerful. If we didn't have faith in the math, even though we can't prove it formally, where would we be? So that's...
Do you feel the same way with logic?
There's several levels of logic, and I'm not an expert on that.
You know, Frege, like one of the first ones to formalize logic, right, thought that math reduced down to logic, right? Is that your view?
No.
Okay.
Math transcends it. Gödel showed that math and logic are not. There's a relationship, but they're not the same thing. There's some things in mathematics that transcend logic, and that was his famous takedown of Russell's logicism description. So where I was all headed with this is I get a little bit, it's like if the foundations of science themselves are unprovable but accepted by reasonable faith, there is definitely a point we cannot answer ultimate questions given our finite mortal situation. What we have to resort to then is we adopt what we may view practically. And that's exactly why it was providential that I met Charles Duke. He came to my campus when I was a student, and he related his journey to Christianity. And then when I read his book, there was that account of him healing a blind girl. And so I just posed, so for him and for that blind girl, Christ is real. Now, it may not be persuasive to outsiders, but for them, in practical matters, are they going to be worrying about these ultimate? I mean, just like the blind man in John chapter 9 didn't talk about philosophical issues. He said, I was blind, now I see. And so the Christian walk, and that's why I tried to address the problem of the hiddenness of God. It's like, well, yes, God could totally settle a lot of our problems practically in these discussions if he showed up, but he's chosen not to. And I tried to give an explanation why. So I just personally think that unless there's something provided to us to help us along to make more practical decisions, doing more philosophy or more math is probably not going to get us there.
Well, okay. So there's a lot of things that you're saying that are actually far more contentious than you would think, right? So first of all, to say that math is grounded in these set of axioms that are ultimately unjustified.
I didn't say they were unjustified. I said they're unprovable. There's a distinction.
Okay, can you go over the distinction for me?
Justified means it seems to have correspondence to the way we think and understand things, and
Say that again.
The fact that physics has a nice mathematical description. There could be axiomatic systems that we could adopt that don't describe physics, but why is there this correspondence? There's actually no formal way of demonstrating why this should be the case. So it's justified because it works from a practical standpoint. And so
I see.
It doesn't mean that it's provable, but it is justified. Otherwise, people wouldn't be studying it and valuing it.
Well, this seems to be a big problem for me, right? That
Sure.
If you're understanding justification in terms of what's practical, the way that we understand practical in philosophy is in terms of what's conducive to our goals, right? So it's very practical that I use a pencil to write, right? That's a practical. Pencil's instrumental. It's a very practical. There's a practical use to a pencil. We wouldn't say anything about having some kind of intrinsic property of like being good or anything. It's like usable. It's something that we can use, and as soon as our goals disappear, if I don't need to write, it's no longer a practical thing to do to use, right? If I need to, let's say, nail something into the wall, right? It's just not practical to use the pencil in that case, right? So if you must not be saying this, right? But you're not. It doesn't seem like you're saying that we want to tie justification to use, right?
It helps.
It helps.
But what I was trying to point out, it's not the same thing to say something is unprovable. It doesn't equate to being unjustified. We make decisions all the time in our personal lives and in our corporate lives with less facts than we would like to have.
Well, let me agree.
In a court case, someone's going to get convicted. We don't have all the facts, but it doesn't mean our conclusions to convict someone are unjustified. If we have such huge amounts of forensic data, we may not, in the ultimate sense, know for sure what really transpired.
Well,
we are justified. So I'm just saying, unprovable doesn't mean unjustified.
But okay, well, there's a bit of agreement. There's a bit of agreement here, and let me go over the agreement. Right, I agree with you that not all forms of justification manifests in the form of proof. After all, we don't prove to ourselves what we're perceiving. That doesn't make any sense, right? I'm looking at your face right now, right? And I'm justified in thinking that there's another person somewhere in the world that looks like you, right? I look at a tree outside, and I'm justified in thinking that there's a tree outside, right? And that's a kind of perception. I think they call it perceptual knowledge, right? Where we don't make inferences to our perceptions. We're just kind of acquire the belief because that thing is in the world, right? So, but perceptual knowledge is nonetheless justified, right? Now, with respect to math and philosophy, or more specifically logic, right, and reasoning, that form of justification changes, right? Does it make sense to say, right, that I'm justified in thinking that if A is B and B is C, that therefore A is C, right? This is just a syllogism, right? That conclusion, I'm justified in that conclusion, but it's not like I perceived it, right? I understood the meanings of the premises that, and I'm equivocating here now. I'm seeing the conclusion, the entailment, based on the meanings of the premises, right? And that's not going to be the same kind of justification as the kind of justification is when you see something outside, right? So what I'm trying to say is that justification is a very broad concept, right, that applies to our system of knowledge as to establish it as knowledge rather than not, right? And it comes in different forms. What I want to say is that knowing something by proof or knowing something deductively is a form of justification.
I've never thought of that, but I'll grant that for our discussion.
Okay.
So no, I'm sincere. If I've not, there are lots of things I don't know. So since you're the philosopher, I'll grant that for our discussion.
Yeah.
I really don't know. Okay, so that's
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's just.
I never thought of it.
It's just, I mean, but I think that you might have not, you might be the case that you have not thought about it, but you understand that when you look at a tree, it's not like you deductively come to the conclusion that there's a tree in front of you. That doesn't really make sense, right? It's like something that you've experienced, something that you see, something you perceived, right? It's just not the same category as when you get a math problem wrong, right? If I wrote the script, like it's just a different, something else is going on there, right? Other than meanings, right? Which is now, I'm not a logicist. In fact, I don't take a view on what math, I don't know if math is reducible or not. I have no clue, right? But I'm fine to grant whatever your system is. Obviously, you're not a logicist. You said that you accept a lot of what Gödel had. Go ahead.
If I could, I believe in logic. I've studied it, but there is logicism. If I could just, I'm going to butcher this if I don't.
Just math is reducible to logic. That's all it is. That mathematics can ultimately be understood in terms of the axioms and logic or some logical truths. That's all that is, right? And there are variant forms.
So there was Stanford Encyclopedia, logicism and neologicism. Logicism is a philosophical foundation. Is a philosophical, foundational, and foundationalist doctrine that can be advanced with respect to any branch of mathematics. The strong version of logicism maintains that all mathematical truths in the chosen branches form a species of logical truths. And
I don't think anything turns on this, though. We can talk about it, but
no, I mean, I'm just trying to, if you'll forgive me, I'm just trying to be just for the sake of completeness.
Okay.
Because it makes me feel a little bit better. Because if I said something and you said I'm not a logicist, I'm just like, well, I'd like to be characterized more accurately. So.
Well, you disagree. What the reason why I said that was that you invoked Gödel as a response to Russell's logicism, right? And that made me think that you disagreed to an extent with Russell. And then I asked you the question whether you think that math and logic are divorced, right? In a lot.
No.
Oh, okay. I didn't ask you that.
No, they're not divorced, but.
Or if one is a subset of the other, I should say.
Here it is.
Okay.
I believe this is correct. I mean, this is too important to just let it go. And so I want to be a little bit rigorous. Okay. During the first half, and I'll provide the link just for the viewer's sake, and then also because I could totally butcher what I was trying to say. I was referencing this sort of history here. It said, and I provided a link. It's from the Encyclopedia Britannica. During the first half of the 20th century, the philosophy of mathematics was dominated by three views. Logicism, intuitionism, formalism. Yep.
Yeah. I took a course on philosophy of math, so I'm.
Perhaps not for your sake then, but really also partly for my sake.
And for the viewers, yeah, for the viewers as well.
And for the viewers. So this is it. The reason is that, with the exception of certain varieties of formalisms, these views are not views of the kind discussed above. So, so it goes into it, and we don't have to go into it here. But my best reading and my understanding of this, subject to change, is that logicism was not powerful enough to encompass the richness of mathematics.
Well, logicism is right now a very minority view in philosophy of math. It is true, right? No,
okay. Well, see, then that's news to me. I didn't know the status of it. So, thank you for that. So I just wanted to say, if people ask me, am I a logicist? That's what I meant. It doesn't mean I believe in illogic. I was saying that it's not sufficient to describe mathematics. I wanted to make that distinction. Because I studied computer science. I mean, it's just like, logic gates all over the place. You have to know it. but I wasn't saying I reject logic. I was saying it's incomplete to describe the richness of mathematics.
No,
So
I might agree with you on that too. I don't hold a view, right? Because I think that all of them are super confused, and in the sense that like the problem with philosophy, and I'll be please, I want everyone to understand this. I really think that there's no philosophical position that answers all the questions and figures out all the problems, including and I even theists will admit that, right? Most Christian philosophers will admit that yeah, while theism completes a portion of a worldview, there are going to be other questions that are either unanswered or problems that are unsolved, right? Doesn't mean that you should just let go of the view, right? And so I find myself, with respect to philosophy of math, it seems like it's all very problematic, and no matter which direction you go, and a lot of people take hybrid views in order to kind of like overcome some of the issues that you would have otherwise had by committing to one over the other. I mean, intuitionists, for example, they reject bivalence, right? That's to say they reject the law of excluded middle. They don't accept that a mathematical statement could either be true or false, right? It could be some, so like it's just like I don't even know what that means, right? So like, but anyways, the point was really going back. Um, I I think that this use of practical, right? Um, I I understand that in terms of my background as that which is conducive to completing a goal or fulfilling a goal. Right now, I want to know if that's what you mean by it.
not necessarily a goal. What I mean by practical, I mean a very simple goal is just not to hurt so bad, right? If someone's in pain, and there are a lot of accounts in the gospel where people in pain came to the Lord and they got healed. All right, we could just. I'm not trying to argue that these things really happened. Obviously, I believe that they did.
I can grant everything. I don't really care about. Yeah, I will grant it.
So the point is that, as I said, life is full of. Maybe another way to phrase it is Douglas Hofstadter in the book Gödel, Escher, Bach. He pointed out the problems is, with the way we try to do things is we have finitistic reasoning. When we try to go to ultimate things, he said, when you're dealing with infinities and stuff, a lot of our normal intuitions really just break down. And then on a practical level, you're asking me what my view is. At a very practical level, given that I was talking about the case of being, say, a juror in a court case where you can't possibly know everything, but a decision is a situation. You're thrown in a situation where you have to make a decision on perhaps incomplete facts. That's true of so many decisions we make in life, and that's all I was saying about being practical, and that's why I raised the issue. And I appreciated T Jump in my debate. I said, "What would you do if you're healed in the name of Jesus?" It really does boil down to that. You could say you'll follow in the rest of your life, or two, you'll think about it, or no, you won't. I mean, those are roughly the three options. And I don't know that there's any way that anyone's going to reason out the correct answer when they don't have access to all the possible facts. That's just the way reality is thrown at us. We have limited time, limited resources to make decisions, and we just do the best we can. It may not be, that's all I really mean by practical. What would you do in that situation? Each person has to decide. And then there will be decisions forced upon us as human beings where we have to make a decision with incomplete facts. That's just the way life is.
Yeah, well, okay. The problem with the way I'm understanding you right now,
okay,
is that there seemed, okay, based on my understanding of you, I think it leads to this conclusion that you will probably push against, right? But if I'm understanding you correctly, I think what you're saying implies that there's an extent of relativism with respect to what we accept or would take to be true, right? So for instance, right, let's take the God example, right, where someone has an extraordinary experience, right, one unlike anything that they had in the past, right, that really seems to convict them of their what they took to be wrongdoings, and really, they had this incredible experience, right? Now they have an option here, right? They can evaluate this situation philosophically. Well, look, philosophically speaking, um, this could be completely caused by physical environmental factors, or some my brain could be quote unquote malfunctioning, and to have these experiences, or there could be a God out there, a very powerful God, all-knowing God that loves me, that is trying to tell me that I need to turn my life around, right? So here there are probably other options, but let's just take these the two options, right? Now, what I would say as a philosopher, right, is something like you have equal justification. That's to say, there's not a reason to rule out one over the other. Okay, and so then you might want to do what's practical, right? In the sense that, look, if I lived my life in a way where that was just a happy brain accident, right, I will be tormented by the possibility that it was God communicating to me, right? Or I could accept, for practical reasons, and in order to avoid that scenario, that this was a God telling me that I need to turn my life around and accept Him, right? And I can find peace in that, right? So now I personally think that philosophically, you're no more warranted going one way or the other, right? But it might be more practical to accept, right, that this is a God. There's a God out there that wants to have a relationship with you, and I don't blame those people. Are put in those situations all the time. I was put in that situation, right, and I chose to. I mean, I had other considerations, but I'm trying to stipulate, given all things being equal, right, that there's no I guess, rational reason to accept one over the other, that they're equally as quote unquote valid for to use the terms colloquially valid, right? So it's just practical to accept. So now let's apply it to abiogenesis, right? My professor in biology 1202 at LSU, right, when he talked about abiogenesis, he was an honest naturalist, right? He said he told the whole class of like 200 people, I am not religious. I don't care for it, right? But whatever happened 3.6 billion years ago, you have to forgive me. Whatever happened around that time was nothing short of a miracle, right? I don't know what the hell happened, but it was incredible, and it happened that life arose. He didn't even say that it came from non-life, right? Now, here as a student, we have an option, right? Okay, was it intentional? Was life intentional at that time, right? Or I know you're a young Earth creationist, so it doesn't matter what the time is, right?
Mhm.
I don't that's not the
Okay.
what my point is, right? There's an option, right? Either to realize upon the realization that whatever happened at the time in which life arose was incredible, you have an option to accept that it was either caused by these unintentional processes of the surrounding environment with respect to that new life form, or that it was intentional, right? And which for me though, right, and this is where we probably disagree, they are equally possible, but it might be the case that it's just practical in your sense of the word, right, to accept one or the other. And if you're a Christian, right, it's just conducive to your aims. You have other commitments with respect to who you are as a human being, what the meaning of life is, and so you come to the conclusion that life was intentional. There was an intelligence behind whatever happened at that point in time, right? And I have no issue with that, right? Now, the problem occurs is, what do we say to the person that takes the opposite view? What do we say to the person that says, no, I don't have any of these. In fact, it's practical for me to accept that life came from non-life unintentionally, right? That is. And so I'm not going to be bothered with the fact that there's some God out there, some intelligent being that is looking over me, and I'm bothered by that. It's just not practical for me to accept that or whatever, right? I'm perfectly happy the way I am, right? What would we say to that person if I understand your notion of practical?
What I would say is it's your life. You make decisions, and you have to be, and you have to live with the consequences. And I really try not to tell people how to live their lives. That's why a lot of times I'll just say, this is the decision I made. I try to draw boundaries and say, I want to give people, I want to emphasize that they make decisions. All of us make decisions that we have to live with the consequences. Yes, I will say yes. I don't want to say they're responsible for the outcomes, because there's a lot of outcomes that happen to us that we had good intentions and it just didn't work out. So the thing is, because we make mistakes, and we can't really blame ourselves totally for it. But I'll just say we'll have to live with the consequences of our decisions, whether the decisions were well-intentioned or not. So I won't tell them. I can only speak for myself fundamentally.
But the aim of the question, in terms of what we should say to that person, was not really in terms of, like, I guess, was it an epistemic question?
Okay.
Is there a problem? Like, for instance.
Yes. Okay. So from as you understood, you may have known, I don't know if I mentioned it in my debate with T-Jump, but I'd actually gotten kicked out of a lot of casinos in the United States for using my math skills as a blackjack card counter. And so that was an environment. It may have been another discussion with someone else. I was in an environment where uncertainty is just like the norm to operate. And that's where decisions are made, definitely in an environment where you have incomplete information. So the cards will be dealt out the way that they're going to be dealt out. The sequence is there. And so when we say that it's, one outcome is more equal than the other, let's just say, hypothetically, from our vantage points, that's true, but there's definitely going to be a right or wrong answer.
Sure, yes.
The way you play your hand. And as a card counter, what we try to do is, because they have something, the probabilities are conditionally dependent, which is very nice property. So the cards that are dealt out give you a better estimate of the cards that are still left in the dealer's shoe, what they call a shoe, or you could say the deck. And that's why you can actually beat the game. Whereas like rolling dice, it's independent trials. But the point is once the dealer has shuffled the cards, there is a right and wrong answer as to what card's coming out next. There's just no question about it. It's already ordained.
But the question here is, but
the outcome from practicality standpoint, the person who built the foundational mathematics to deal with that situation, in which eventually led to card counters like me being able to beat the casinos and then the casinos kicking us out, was Pascal. It wasn't a matter of just saying, well, mathematically one outcome is just as equal as the other. It's the price you pay for being wrong or right. That's where the practicality comes in. Because if you make a decision, I'll just give a very practical illustration. Let's say you had someone you loved, and there's a 1 in 100 chance that they'll get killed if they start driving in bad weather. Wouldn't it be?
There's a 100% chance. What? Sorry, could you repeat that last?
1 in 100 chance that they'll be in an accident if they drive in bad weather. So even though formally there's a 99% chance that they're going to be okay, there's that 1% chance they might be in an accident. And the auto insurance companies have really even better statistics on this. They factor all sorts of things to be able to calculate the premium. So there are known statistics that are related to this. I'm not just totally grabbing this out of the air. And they assign what they call expected values for the outcomes versus the probabilities, and we call that an expected value. That's how we also, if the casinos figure out the payoffs for various games. and then the card counters try to take advantage of that. So that's how I define practicality. It's like, okay, so if Jesus came along and healed you and offered you eternal life, would you take it? Or would you take the course that Tracy Harris, she said at Ortija, oh, I try to figure out a naturalistic explanation. One has to weigh and say, okay, what's the probability you will figure it out, assuming there is a naturalistic explanation, and there's a possibility there won't be a naturalistic explanation. What you lose out on is that Jesus came, tried to touch your life, and you walked away.
If he's wrong, right, or if he's hesitant, right? But I think that now,
again, I'm just using gambling math. That's just
right. I want to talk about that, right?
Sure.
The point now, it seems like you're tying practicality to probability. Am I wrong about that?
Practicality, probability, and rewards. Rewards, and I hate to use the word punishment. I'm sorry, it fails me. Let's say good outcomes versus bad outcomes. But I'm going to use maybe less formal terms: rewards and punishments.
Yeah. Well, okay. So now this to me complicates the dialectic. But let me just understand your view. Okay. You're not simply giving Pascal's wager here. It doesn't seem, because the fact that you've talked about card counting and the probabilities makes me think that you're not, right? Because first of all, how I read Pascal like 6 years ago is that Pascal was talking to the agnostic, right? He wasn't really talking to like a hardcore atheist, like someone like David Hume. Pascal's argument would hardly apply to someone like David Hume, right? It would apply to someone that's literally on the fence and sees the probabilities as equal. Okay. So that's to say that you're a person, you're deciding all equal probability, equal reason to be on one side of the fence over the other, right? But then Pascal's pointing to look at all the, go ahead, correct me if I'm wrong.
And I just posed this to atheists. I said, what if there's a 1% chance you're wrong and the Christian God is real? Let's say 1,000,000% chance that the Christian God, 1 out of 1,000,000 that the Christian God is real. Would you take the bet? So it doesn't even have to be equal odds.
So you're not giving, well, Pascal, maybe you can correct me. I was just trying to give Pascal's view, right? Maybe you have a different view than Pascal, right?
Well, but what the original wager was is not, I mean, it's related to Pascal's wager, and I'm not denying that. I can only articulate the way, whether it's characterized as Pascal's wager or not. I'm just articulating my reasoning.
Okay.
So there's probably the historical framing.
Okay, we'll throw that out. I don't mean to do that, right? I just want to understand your view, right?
Okay.
So it seems like your view is there's two sides of the fences, right? Now consider the probabilities. Even if it was being on this side of the fence, you'd have a millionth chance of going to being damned for eternally, right? Wouldn't that serve as a reason to, even despite the huge improbability, right? I guess compared to being on the other side of the fence, right? Isn't that a reason to move to the other side, right? Is that what I'm understanding?
Well, that's very close to it.
Okay.
You're very close. What I was trying to say is, if we knew the probabilities in advance, we wouldn't have to be. I mean, we would actually be God, so it's kind of a moot point.
Well, I'm about to get to that, right?
Yeah, because so what I'm saying is, what the test is in terms of wagering is whether there's self-consistency in your viewpoints. If there's, given what you have, are you making the right wagering decisions? Because in the most formal sense, like say in the casino, again, because this is such a tangible, very exact mathematical thing, if there is a sequence of cards in the deck, there is hypothetically absolutely a correct way to play every hand. No question of that, if you knew actually the sequence of cards ahead of time. And the sequence is already determined just after the shuffle, and then when the dealer loads the card decks into their little machine or dispenser. However, we don't know in advance what the sequences are, generally speaking. There's some exceptions. We call them shuffle trackers or whatever, but we don't know it in advance. So the best we can do is try to make decisions consistent with what little knowledge we have of the odds. That's all we can do. I'm not saying that the decision's going to be right.
Right.
The decision will be mathematically optimal. That's all.
But
given what little we know. Given what little we know.
Okay, but then
really
now here's a point of contention that I want to push, and this is what I've been trying. This is what I'm
Sure.
trying to get to. I just want to understand your view. So the word probable, right, is actually a very problematic term because the way that it's used colloquially and even in professionally or technically, it's just so much equivocation, right?
Yes.
So
agreed.
A lot of cases, people, when they say probable, they might be talking about a sort of confidence or an intuition, right? And that can't be the kind of probable that you're talking about, right? Because I think because given that you've kind of set the background of card counting and math, right? That those notions of probable are not the ones that you're tracking, right?
That is correct, but I'll point out. I mean, if I could clarify a little bit, even Richard Dawkins gives his estimate. Everyone, all I'm saying is, okay, so we can't be very exact when it comes to questions of like kind of metaphysical questions: does God exist or not? But if even Richard Dawkins, like one of the most hardcore atheists, he said, he had a scale from 1 to 7, with 7 being certain there's no God. He said, yeah, I'm at about 6.9. And I did some calculations. I said, that you have a higher probability from what he said. And I actually did this.
Yeah.
From what he said, the probability of God is actually higher than him getting in an accident at some point if he's driving an automobile. I said, even the insurance companies wouldn't want to bet against a driver having no accidents. So
now, while I really,
so even the insurance companies are doing a little bit when they collect premiums to protect themselves. I said, I wanted to say, Richard Dawkins, if those are your estimates, like 6.9 or even 6.99 or whatever, anything that's non-zero in your estimate is telling me you're making still not the wisest bet.
Well, but this is my point, right? That I just don't. First of all, I'm no fan of Richard Dawkins or any of the Four Horsemen. I think they're all. I'm not going to use horrible language. I really, really, really don't like them. Okay, and not for their persons. Actually, I actually Christopher Hitchens is very fun to listen to. He's like a poet on TV, right? But no, philosophically, they're all bankrupt. Every single one of them, right? Maybe Daniel Dennett has something going on, but even then, I hate reading Dennett. It doesn't make any sense to me, right? But and this is me, some kind of agnostic atheist saying this, right? But bracketing that, right? The thing is that when Dawkins is 6.9, right? I don't interpret him as giving like a mathematical statement, right? It's just him given his level of confidence, right? It's a way of expressing his convictions, right? And that is not mathematical at all, right? Go ahead.
Well, the point is how can anyone say they're 100% knowingly correct?
Well, I know.
I mean, we don't have. I don't think anyone will say I know 100%.
I would say that. I would say that to many statements.
There's only one thing we can't deny. It's our own pain.
Our own pain, our own existence. Also, I know 100% that if you're a bachelor, you cannot be married, right? That's just, and so this is kind of going back to what the original point of the conversation was to discuss possibility and impossible. What it means to say, I think, I'm no probability theorist, so you're going to have to help me. I think you know a lot more about probability than I do. What it means to say something's impossible is that there's no probability with respect to it, right? Or what it means to say that something is necessary is, once again, there's 100% probability, which is to say that it's just the term it's a category error, right? There's a probability with respect to, is there, what's the probability that if I go outside that there's going to be a horse in front of me? We can talk about probabilities there, but what's the probability of a bachelor being married, right? It's a category error, a big one at that, right? Because we're talking about notions like impossible or necessary, right? So many Christians think God is necessary, for instance.
I think a better term would be like square circles in Euclidean geometry. You can actually have square circles in non-Euclidean
Yeah,
geometry.
I'm
I saw
aware.
one example, but I like that one better because I like the math. That's just
Okay.
really precise.
I mean, sure, right? I mean, a lot of people think mathematical truths are necessary, right? Now that goes back to our discussion about
So,
axioms.
I think you gave a valid criticism or concern about my choice of words. So I'll try to qualify things. I say it's practically impossible,
Okay, and that
rather
goes
than
back.
being absolutely, and so thank you for the correction and helping me improve the way I communicate. Because I do want to give less reasons for my critics to criticize what I say. So it's good that I do learn to choose my words a little more carefully.
Okay, so let me
So,
start. Go ahead,
so
sir.
my thank you.
Oh no, I don't really. I think this is just semantics, right? We're not. I mean, I want to get to the meat of the conceptual issue, right? Just because I use the words differently doesn't mean that I'm correct. I mean, I don't know. Maybe you I don't know. I don't want to take credit for that, but the fact that you thanked me. But no, the point is something like this then, right? Before I'll preface this with this: in modal logic, there's no such thing as to my knowledge, as practical possibility or practical impossibility. The closest thing to it is something called epistemic possibility. Okay, and that's something you might be able to appeal to, but even then, there's problems I think for you. Now, so there's two ways we could talk about this discussion, right? We can get into the concepts of practical, the concept, what it means to say something's impossible, and kind of extrapolate from that, or I can talk about the four main notions of possibility in modal logic, and then you could say, this is what I mean, right? This is what I'm talking about, right?
Yes, and I'm not trying to cut you off, but we're already going up around an hour, and
Okay.
you're certainly worth it. I mean, I appreciated your kindness and your kind words for me in Speed of Sound's channel, and that's why I rushed to try to get a meeting with you. So, um,
We can talk about
20
this later.
minutes. Can we go on another 20 minutes? I don't want to cut you off. Is 20 minutes adequate? So that'd be about another 20 minutes from now, and
Well,
we can hopefully we can get to the meat of what you're trying to get to.
Well, okay. So let me give my claim. Okay, I'm going to put my claim on the table about what I think about your view, right? And then you can have a response to that, and then we'll set up another meeting at a better time. Do you want to do that? Right? Because
Actually, I'm not trying to cut you off. It's funny. In the last month, so many people now are trying to get a hold of me. It's unreal. Never had that in a long time, which is actually refreshing. So if I have time, this would be a conversation
Okay.
we're pursuing. So I can't guarantee anything.
Of course,
But,
that's fine.
I just want to emphasize I'm grateful for all the people that have shown support and appreciation. And
Okay,
there's only one of me, unfortunately.
I understand. So then I'll make my argument really quick then. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
So the point is that I don't know. I can't make sense of the notion of practical impossibility. I only am aware of, and some of these, one of these I don't accept, four kinds of impossibilities. Logical, which means there's a contradiction given the three logical axiomatic truths of the laws of logic contradict the one, law of identity, law of non-contradiction, and bivalence, which is excluded middle. There's physical impossibility, which has to do with some kind of contradiction made because of some given natural law that we know of, right? And then the third one is metaphysical possibility. This is the kind of possibility that Kripke and William Lane Craig invoke to understand in terms of what's feasible for God, or why water is necessarily H2O. It's one of the most controversial kinds of possibilities, right? But it has to do with the nature, essence of things. It's the nature of water that it's H2O, and so there's some kind of entailment there. That's what Kripke wants to say. Saul Kripke, right? Now, and then there's epistemic possibility, which is to say something like, given all my background knowledge, right? Given everything that I believe, rather, right? There's nothing that contradicts it. So it's epistemically possible, right? So it's epistemically possible, I guess, that I can, so think about a good example was like, it's epistemically possible that we can live on Mars. Okay. Now, there might be some natural set of laws to where it's impossible. I don't know what those might be, but we could just make up something for the sake of argument that there's not enough resources on Earth to habitate Mars, right? But we don't. I'm not aware of such restrictions or constraints. So it's epistemically possible. So given all I know about science and blah 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 blah, right? I don't think there's anything wrong with saying that it's possible to live for the humanity to relocate to Mars, right? Now there could, but that's considering the fact that there could be some set of physical laws that constrain us in that way. But I'm not aware of them, so there's nothing that contradicts my background beliefs, right? Now, then there's your notion of practical impossibility. Now, this to me, sometimes I've heard virtually impossible, or I've heard of that, but I don't know what that is. But I've said that, and when I've said that, when I was a creationist, right, I would mean something like it's just inconceivable, right? Like I just cannot imagine a world in which this would happen, right? Now, so that ties in with conceivability, right? And there's a lots of literature with respect to the relationship between something that's conceivable or inconceivable and possible or impossible, right? And maybe that's what I think you're saying, right? Something like it's inconceivable that life would come from non-life, right? In which case, I would ask, there's a whole debate there about the relationship between modality and then conceivability.
Now what? Oh, were you finished? I don't want to interrupt you.
That's yeah.
So
that's
I posted a link to the law of large numbers, and it actually tries to put some practical bounds on what we should expect. And so there's casinos, insurance companies, investment institutions. This is really important to them, especially the casinos and insurance companies. The law of large numbers.
Yeah, I'm familiar with it.
And so it does try to put some idea in a practical level what we mean by virtually impossible. It's like, okay, what we mean by virtually impossible is when you start to bet your life or your business on an idea.
But that just means high improbability, in my view.
Yes, but
what's the difference between that?
I mean, if lives are depending on it, then from a practical standpoint, would you bet your life?
No, absolutely not. But that's because I think
what people bet their life on, or the lives of their loved ones. That's why when I was doing casino gambling and then also analyzing things like insurance and investments and banking, that is the more common kind of decision making that we encounter in everyday life, where we make decisions with incomplete information. All the other ones where there's certainty are not really that relevant to my life. Like, the question is square circles. What does it do for me? I mean, yeah, we would accept it as a false statement in Euclidean geometry. It doesn't help me live my life.
I don't mean to be interrupt because I know I'm
limited
in time. That's the only reason why I'm interrupting. Otherwise, I would let you finish. The point is that then, once again, it seems like if we understand virtually impossible or practical impossibility in terms of a kind of probability, right, then it's no longer a modal notion. It's no longer. I'm assuming that you know what modality is, right?
I'm sorry.
Oh,
I'm not a philosopher. You can tell. You can. That's probably very obvious. So,
okay. Well, very briefly,
and the viewers, and I appreciate your time trying to explain it to me.
So modality refers to, or it's something that's modal, refers to what could be or could have not been, what can or cannot happen, what's necessary or contingently true, or impossible. That these are all modal notions, right? And the thing is that if you're talking about a probability, right, then it's no longer impossible or necessary. Right? It's a contingent fact that if some kind of improbable or probable thing were to actualize, that it actualizes, okay? And thus cannot be impossible or necessary, right? And so what happens if the second that it's true, that something has a probability value, is the second that we're no longer talking about necessary or impossible, according to the modal logicians, right? So that means that what you're saying with respect to practical impossibility or virtually impossible boils down to some ridiculous probability that should motivate you to accept one thing over another. But nonetheless, we're not really talking about something that's necessary or impossible in terms of what, because if something has a probability value other than 100%, right, it's a contingent fact, which means that it's possible, or it's possible that it happened, or it's not possible. It's also as possible. It's just as possible that it would have not happened, right? And I think that's my problem, right? That I think that what you want to understand virtually impossible to be is construed in terms of probability.
Well, again, when we say probability, it's just like when I'm in the casino. There is a right and wrong answer. I don't want to grant that there could be.
Yeah, I'm not disputing.
Yeah, there is definitely, it's either going to be one card or another card that comes out of the deck. And we just don't know. So it's one of these things. I don't want to say that. I don't want to suggest that there is not a right answer. There is. We just may not have access to it. And then so when I say practical, what we are trying to do is say, given our limited and often conflicting and sometimes misleading set of data points, we have to. There are a lot of decisions were just forced on us. Decisions. Some of these decisions are forced on us, like even just like when we're driving or something. So that's where I was saying. So I'm not. I think you're correct to say that, would you be happier if I said practically speaking or virtually? What choice of words would you prefer me to use where you wouldn't be so disconcerted with
Well, let me explain my motivation here, right? The point is that...
No, I want to have a better choice of words. And I'm sorry, my mother needs me.
Of course.
We're going to have to end this conversation. Take care.
I'll talk to you later. Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Okay.